15 or 20 years ago. And it took that long to kind of get it published. Again, a slim volume. And I originally thought about having it illustrated, but how did he get from this kid in Duck Run, Ohio, to become the person that we all know, or some of us know, according to Mark? Well, we'll let Mark explain that part. His name was Branch, and in his brain was brewing a great experiment. Just like you, just like me, he started off as a kid. He started off as a kid in Duck Run, Ohio. Duck Run, you say? Yes, Duck Run, a tiny little town no bigger than your thumb on a map of the state that's round on the ends and high in the middle, Ohio. And ducks and farms, and in nearby Turkey Creek, a one-room schoolhouse where in 1898, Branch taught a whole room of kids when he was only 17. Before that, he was just a poor boy who stuttered, spitting out letters that stuck on his tongue, practicing until patience polished his speech. He was a poor boy who devoured any book he could find, like the waterlogged ones his father brought home from fire sales, books by Washington Irving and Dante, stories glowing with adventure. He had ideas, that boy Branch. They were always bubbling in his brain. He experimented with this and that, taking risks, seeing which choice was stronger, wiser, and most of all, the right thing to do. He had ideas and wanted to help when the going got tough. In the mid-1890s, the going was always tough in small-town Ohio. Crops to save, mouths to feed, and relatives to help. He was young, strong, and needed on the farm. Oh yes, family was incredibly important. There was Big Brother Orla away at teaching, who worshiped baseball and taught Branch to pitch and catch. There was little brother Frank, who worshiped Branch and grew up to catch bootleggers and scout baseball. There was his mother, who later made him promise Sunday is for the pew, not the ballpark, a promise he always kept. There was his father, who sowed corn, sorghum, and salvation. He taught his son the merit of hard work, feeding cattle, hogs, and hungry souls. And so Branch prayed and plowed, he sloughed pigs, he lifted hay and hymns high to his Lord, and all the while in his brain was brewing a great experiment. Ideas were brewing, ideas of daring and courage. They kept percolating. Branch wanted to teach like his big brother, like Orla. He lived to play this new game of baseball with a joy so glorious that some days it swept him away. He had ideas, but no fancy diploma, no high school certificate with a pretty gold stamp, just big biceps from working the farm. That was enough for Branch. He did it all on his own, read and studied and worked the farm, and then read and studied and worked the farm some more, and with his parents' okay, became a teacher at that one-room schoolhouse.
You talk about the rags to riches story of Branch Rickey. I mean, it's really absolutely remarkable. He gets to Ohio Wesleyan as a conditional student. He does not have a high school diploma. And because he was with it was an area, a poor area, there were a lot of moonshiners there, and a lot of people didn't see the need for education. And even Branch's father, Jacob Frank Rickey, and there were so many Franks in that family, sometimes it was hard to keep up, even the people who knew him. He felt college was for rich people, but Branch's mother, Emily Brown, believed in college, believed in reading. There was a great family story about a fire in a bookstore right near where they lived in Scioto County near Portsmouth, and they were able to bring picture books and great Dante's Inferno as drawn by Daumier. And that's what he grew up on. And Emily always encouraged him. And as I started my research and go make these trips to both Portsmouth, where he grew up, and then Ohio Wesleyan, which is just north of Columbus, you got to see the environment that he came from. And so when he was teaching in high school, there were a lot of people, the students didn't want to be there. And one of them challenged him physically. And Branch, as Marjorie just said, was a strong guy, and they had it out. And from then on, the student did come and really respected him. So from that early age, he he saw the importance of education, and he also saw in sports the way a fulfillment of your physical success as well as your mental success. But he came from this very poor family. And so one summer after sophomore year, he goes to play for pay. And this is before the NCAA was created, which was 1906. But the rules were very strict. If you played, took pay for play, you were a pro and you couldn't play in college. And so the people at Ohio Wesleyan said, well, you're not eligible to play anymore, but you obviously know the game. So they make him a coach as a junior. And Marjorie, why don't you step in with one of the important stories about where Branch's commitment to equality got developed.
In 1901, Branch's nervous parents waved goodbye. They were afraid of the worldly ways of universities, but confident in the integrity of their son. And Jenny, his girlfriend, well, she was confident too, and sent Branch off with a kiss to his new college experiment, classes, sports, and odd jobs, as many as he could juggle. One of those jobs was playing catcher for the semi-pro Portsmouth Navies, close to home and with a better paycheck than he earned from heaving hay. Branch thought he hit a home run. He was rounding the bases. But sometimes, even with the best intention, inexperience tagged you out. Branch learned this soon enough. The next fall, the college president called him in to say, no paid athletes allowed at the college. Talk about a tense moment. It had never occurred to Branch that he wasn't allowed to play baseball at Ohio Wesleyan while getting paid to play outside of college too. Ideas were sure brewing in his brain then, ideas about losing everything and starting over, ideas about embarrassing his family and his girl, no more college varsity position, maybe no more school at all. The owner of the Portsmouth Navies even swore to the college that Branch never got a penny. That was a lie, and Branch wouldn't have none of that. No, he had to take a stand. It was risky, but right. Sometimes folks don't notice when you make the right choice, but you need to make it anyway. Sometimes folks do notice. This time, at least one person did. Despite being called out, Branch discovered that the game changed. Some changes were good. Sure, he couldn't catch for the college varsity team now, but he wasn't kicked out of school either. The president was too impressed with him for that. Even better, Branch got the okay to play professional baseball and football for the area teams. He got to play his sports and get paid. That was a nice surprise. And then he could pay his bills and keep learning. He always wanted to keep learning. Eventually, he could even marry his sweetheart. A few years and a few broken bones later, Branch was done with football. But oh, how everything took off in baseball. Everything took off, but not in the way Branch expected. Not in the way anyone expected. I think that's a good stop.
They're playing in 1903, and the thing about being faithful in research is that you're always, if you're making a mistake, you got to admit it, and there are minor mistakes and there are big mistakes. Thanks to a fellow, Jay Sokol, who I met during a speaking engagement, what happened in Notre Dame in South Bend, it actually happened in 1903, not 1904, as has been mistakenly written, including in the book here. But in 1903, they're playing Notre Dame. They've had trouble. He's got a catcher, Charlie Thomas, one of two black players on the team. And Thomas is catching. He's also a first baseman, but Branch can't can't play anymore because of the ruling. And so I like to look at Charlie Thomas as one of Branch's first conversions. And Branch really believed in Jesus without being a total evangelist. And he saw in this husky, talented athlete that he could catch, use the tools of intelligence, not ignorance. And so early in the season, they're playing at West Virginia, and the fans are shouting, "Get the N off the field." Now in South Bend, they're playing Notre Dame, and they're ready to check into the hotel, the Oliver Hotel in downtown South Bend, and the clerk says, we don't take black people. And I'm sure he didn't say black. And Branch, here's this 22-year-old guy who was already a very good debater, going back and forth about why I want to see your boss, and they argue, and finally it's agreed that Branch can put up Charlie Thomas in his room in a cot. So that's a compromise, because the one thing about Rickey that has always appealed to me is that he knew when to fight all out, and he knew when a fair compromise or a tolerable compromise was possible. They get into the room, and Branch sees Charlie, and this has been embellished in a lot of ways, but the incident did really happen. And he's saying to Branch, or to the world, "If only my skin were white." And Branch later told his first biographer and his close associate, Arthur Mann, that he never felt more helpless in his life. But he did say, as the enthusiastic, optimistic guy he was, one day it'll change, but for now, let's play ball. Now, it was, if you've seen 42, which I've seen maybe 5 times, and I was on a conference in Stanford to discuss the movie at the end of April, it's not as dramatic as that film makes it, that he says to Jackie Robinson, I'm doing it for Charlie Thomas. But it was in his back of his mind, certainly, and there was a real Charlie Thomas who they stayed in touch with. He became the first black dentist in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And there's a letter in the Rickey archives of the Library of Congress where in the 1930s he says, "Dear Branch," or he calls him Brother Branch because they were in the same fraternity. My son wants to come to St. Louis and work for the Cardinals this summer. And so Branch writes back, "Can he type? Can he drive?" Because Branch was a horrible driver. I mean, believe me, he was a human being. He wasn't, up here. And so it didn't happen, but when the triumph of 47 happened, there was a piece in a Negro Digest magazine that Mark Harris wrote. Mark Harris would later become somewhat famous, writing Bang the Drum Slowly and other baseball novels, and became a professor at Arizona State. Charles Thomas writes Harris with the story that, he was always treated as an equal and a friend, like Branch Rickey. So, all right, we now get Branch graduated, and he said, because he loved Ohio Wesleyan more than any institution, at the end of his life he was raising money for him. And I don't know if you ever met Bob Holm. I did an interview with Bob Holm, who was a administrator when Branch was trying to raise money for Ohio Wesleyan at the end of his life. And he ran into an old football player, and they started doing 80-year-old guys going back with some of the track plays they used to play as undergraduates. So he loved Ohio Wesleyan, and so he said that when he graduated as a regular student, not a conditional student, it was one of his happiest moments. But he wants to marry Emily Moulton, and she comes from the other side of the tracks in Lucasville, which is part of Scioto County, southern Ohio. And Branch tells his future father-in-law that I'm going to play ball to make enough money to support my future wife, and then I'm going to become a lawyer. So he does make the major leagues on one weekend that there are no games. He marries Jenny Moulton during the 1906 baseball season. There's a story that probably is true, that his buddies from Lucasville steal his wedding suit before the wedding and play a prank on him. And you fast forward, by the way, 40 years, when Jackie Robinson got married, his buddies did the same thing. So you still see an early, incredible bond between these future pioneers. So he goes back in the fall. He starts coaching at Ohio Wesleyan, and one of the student papers asked him, does baseball and religion connect? Or is there a conflict between baseball and religion? Now mind you, 1906. He answers very seriously. He says, I believe in my religion. I practice it. I keep Sunday as a day of rest. But I see no difference between being religious and wanting to win a baseball game and wanting players to want to win. And he adds, I'm uncomfortable with that question because I don't really see these two worlds are so different. He becomes, in his last year, 1907, he's playing for the New York Islanders as a catcher. But he's hurt his arm. In the fall, he had been drilling with the future varsity at OW, and as always, he was super enthusiastic, and he throws his arm out. Well, you're a major league catcher. You have a bad arm. You're in trouble. And so he sets a record that still stands. 13 base runners were stolen by the Washington Senators in a game against Ohio. So and he winds up a career with a .239 batting average, which today would get you $15 million. But back then, you had a hit as a catcher. You still had a hit close to 300. So he starts law school at night in 1908, and he also, because he is both a big Republican as well as a practicing Christian, he supports the insurgent, he supports the GOP ticket, because at this period of history, practically everybody in Ohio was a Republican, because the Civil War wasn't that far in the past. But he's such a multitasker and enthusiastic about everything he does that he's diagnosed with TB. And fortunately, because the network that he created from his earliest life, somebody at the Ohio Wesleyan University in the administration knows somebody at Trudeau, the sanatorium, who, if you didn't know, is the Trudeau that founded that. It's the fifth generation that landed with Gary Trudeau of Dewsbury. And he's there. He's there for a few months. He learns to sleep outdoors, which he would do for many years when he came out of the sanitarium, because the fresh air would be better. But when he also becomes the captain of the checkers club at the sanitarium. And then when he's checked out, they tell him, relax, don't overstress. Well, he doesn't overstress. He goes to Michigan now. He enrolls in their law school, and they tell him, and then he becomes the baseball coach. And when the law school dean finds out about that, well, I don't know if you can do both things, but you better, here are 20 credits for you. So he does it, and he does well. He may not be deansless, but he gets his degree, and one of his, the first players that comes on the campus is George Sisler. And George Sisler, if he didn't have eye problems and then sinusitis, he wound up with 2,812 hits, but he was up there with Lou Gehrig as a first baseman. Some put him in an all-time team ahead of Gehrig. And to give you an idea about what the man that Rickey mentored, Sisler helped Gehrig when Gehrig was sitting on the bench behind Wally Pipp. And then in 1947, when Jackie Robinson was asked to play first base, because Gil Hodges comes along, he's still a catcher, it's George Sisler who teaches him the rudiments of first base. So, and the Sisler family and the Rickey family become, lifelong friends. So the record at Michigan in Sisler's only year that Rickey managed him was 22-4, and then it's time with the law degree for Branch to start the law practice, and since he's a recovering TV victim, Boise, Idaho seems the place for him to practice law because it's wide open spaces. But they don't have many, he and his partners don't have many clients, and he had made friends with Hedges, the Browns owner, St. Louis Browns, and Hedges invites him to come. And so he becomes the business manager. They didn't call general managers until later in the 20s. And one of the first players he has with the St. Louis Browns is a fleet outfielder, also from Ohio, whose nickname is Barney because he was seen to be as fast as Barney Oldfield, the race car driver. But his full name is Bert Schott. So, fast forward to 1947, when Leo DeRocher is suspended, who takes over but Bert Schott? And 42, by the way, the film is very good about showing that. I mean, a lot of 42 is quite good. It's tremendously cast. And thank the Lord that they had a character, Chris Merlone playing Leo DeRocher, because, you talk about a couple. I mean, Rickey and DeRocher may be the oddest couple in baseball history, but more than that tomorrow. So, okay, he's in St. Louis. The Browns are not a contending team, in fact, but they're not embarrassing because Rickey, from his work with the college players, he's getting innovative. He's brought in the pitching strings where pitchers can learn on the sidelines how to throw strikes, and not just strikes, because when I played softball, I could throw strikes, but they were hitter strikes. You have to throw pitcher strikes. And sliding pitch, which becomes a really big part of the Rickey method, is learn to slide on both parts of the body and how to avoid tag. So he's innovating right there. But the Federal League War comes, and a lot of money is lost by the owners, but the antitrust exemption comes out of the lawsuit that follows out of that, and that's a story for another time. So Rickey, the Cardinals, the other team in town, may be leaving, and when the word comes, how can we protect this team? And so it becomes the powers to be in St. Louis take a poll, secret vote, and everyone says Branch Rickey comes should take over the Cardinals, and he does. And he's got one asset. Rogers Hornsby, who had been signed early, and Rogers Hornsby was, I think, the most euphemistic way to describe Hornsby as a person was Branch Rickey said George Sisler was the easiest player to keep sweet Rogers Hornsby was the hardest player to keep sweet. I mean, a more blunt way of saying it is he was as subtle as a belch. He played the horses and he played gambled, and and yet he was probably the greatest right-handed hitter of all time. And so, but before he can even build a team with Hornsby, World War I breaks out. And Rickey, at the age of 36, decides he must go too. And one of the daughters, Grant, told me that was the only two times that Jane Rickey thought she couldn't deal with Branch in all his ways. One is when he was 36 years old, goes to war in the chemical warfare service with 3 little ones at home and another one on the way. But he had to do it, and he's in, and he gets pneumonia on the way out of on the boat going to France. But fortunately, it's not. It's cured, and so he's in a unit with Ty Cobb and Christy Mathewson, and they play cards together. And he will later say that Cobb was had almost obsessive desire to win at anything he did. And they would also add that the only person that had a better will to win than Jackie Robinson was Ty Cobb. So you see the connections that this man had and will always have in the game. Well, he comes back from the war, and then in 1919, he takes over the Cardinals, and they start playing well. But this is the period when the Giants and the Yankees are in 3 straight World Series. And when you talk about the trading deadline, it was Rickey who had enough. There was a growing power in baseball to stop players coming into New York, the 2 New York teams, after June 15th. I mean, now it's moved much further into the season. And so finally, Hornsby has a great individual year, hitting .424, but the team is folding, and they're not contending. And he even almost has a fist fight with Hornsby after one game, because Rickey was signaling that Hornsby take a 3-1 pitch. And after the game, Hornsby, you don't tell me to take a pitch. And they almost have a fist fight in the clubhouse. And who saves Rickey from damage but Bert Schotten, who is now with the Cardinals. So again, you see that when he developed a coterie of people he could trust and knew what they were doing, it was lifelong. So Hornsby takes over as manager from Rickey after Memorial Day in 1925, because the season tickets, not just regular attendance, is way down. And Hornsby becomes player manager. They finish the season decently, and they win the World Series in 26, and St. Louis goes wild. But Hornsby got into almost a fight with the real owner of the team, Braden, who made his fortune in automobiles. Also a Horatio Alger story. Didn't go graduating the 4th grade, but he became a big mogul in St. Louis. And so they have to trade Hornsby, and all they get was Frankie Frisch, who becomes a Hall of Famer too. And then Rickey is doing well. They win 4 pennants in 6 years and 3 of the World Series. But there's a drought from 35 to 42, and Braden's retired from autos, and he thinks that he can do baseball as well as Rickey, and doesn't have to pay him. And Rickey is the highest paid man in baseball, really. And that's where a lot of the controversy comes. So Rickey knows that He's out when his contract is up at 42. But he knows that as early as 1939, when Braden has somebody who works for one of the farm clubs who is a big Rickey supporter and a talented guy. He fires him. And so, you take a shot at a member of the family, and that's, Rickey will not forget. So they win it, they beat the Yankees in 42, and Rickey lands in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn is almost bankrupt, but Brooklyn, he tells the owners that I can build a farm system here that will be as good as any and better than St. Louis. And he gets the ownership to agree that they can scout black players, and as long as it's not going to be for a social crusade. And so they first look at all right, so the background here, Rickey has scouted with a lot of his people, the Negro Leagues. Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson are clearly the pick of the litter, but they're also old. Gibson's not healthy, and Paige might have been one of the who was more high paid than a lot of people in the white leagues. And he pitched 3 innings, leave, go to another game, pitch 3 innings, and he'd make a pretty good living that way. And so that's not realistic. So the word comes about this former great athlete at UCLA who had been in the Rose. They just missed the Rose Bowl by a tie, and he had played against white people. He even played in a backfield with 2 other blacks, Woody Strode, who became the actor in Spartacus and other plays, and Kenny Washington, who is in Easy Living, where the LA Rams are featured. And also, Kenny Washington integrated the NFL in 1946, and there was Robinson. But football was not a particular lucrative business yet. So baseball was still the thing. And so the word comes that Robinson had just had a bogus tryout in Boston, and they didn't even take any information, although the word was he was the best player in the tryout. And the sports writer Wendell Smith, played by Andre Holland in the movie, and I wish they had other black writers in there, but because it wasn't just one paper, although it was the most popular one. Smith says, this is Robinson, I saw him try out for the Red Sox, and he looked like the best. And Rickey says, Robinson? I know him as a football player. Well, it turned out he was some people thought basketball was his best sport. And so Sue Firth goes out to Kansas City, where he's playing for the Monarchs, actually in Chicago, where he's playing for the Kansas City Monarchs in the Negro Leagues. But he's hurt his knee. And so Sue Firth says, well, I'd like to talk to you. And Robinson was very suspicious. So they go to the same Hotel Stevens, which is owned by the family of the future Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens. But Sue Firth is smart enough to know the situation. He slips the elevator operator some money so they go up the front elevator because they couldn't go up the back elevator. And so Sue Firth says, come to Brooklyn, and I'm scouting a game in Toledo, but here's the money to Toledo. And then they get on the train, and they arrive. Robinson that night, the 27th, stays at the Hotel Thereses in Harlem because he was already a prominent man as somebody who saw what was happening in terms of racial equality. And so he gets on the train and goes to meet Sue Firth in on Montague Street, 215 in Brooklyn Heights, and pick up the story.
Okay. Yes, Jackie had baseball talent, integrity, and spirit, but Branch wanted to know, did he have the patience and self-control to win the larger battle and ensure the success of the experiment? And so the intense interview of August 28, 1945 began. It lasted a long 3 hours. And of course, he first asked if he has a girlfriend. He counsels him to marry Rachel, who, by the way, just turned 104, right? Then I'll skip a little bit. He had even more big questions to ask and buttons to push. Did Jackie have the guts? Not the guts to fight back, but the guts not to fight back. Now Branch really went into action. He pretended he was first this racist person and then that one. He ridiculed, he yelled, he jabbed his fist in Jackie's face. He called him all the names Jackie would be called. Get out. No room for you in this hotel, boy, from a hotel clerk. Get out. No food for you at this restaurant, boy, from a waiter. Get out. No seat for you on my train, from a conductor. Get out. No game for you at this ballpark, from a spectator. Get out. No place for you in our baseball, from a sports writer. And then Branch became a mean-as-they-come bully ball player, pretending to slam into Jackie with his spikes. Take that. Could Jackie take it? Branch needed to know. Could he be more than just a good ball player and make the experiment work? It was all up to Jackie. Now Branch pulled out his much-loved copy of Life of Christ and started reading. Turning the other cheek means not receiving the second blow. It means cutting the chains of the inevitable wrongs at the first link. Your adversary is ready for anything but this. This had to be their way in, Branch explained, to take down the enemies of integration. Could Jackie cut the chains of injustice? Could he fight for equality by turning the other cheek? Could he do it for 3 whole years? Did Jackie have the courage to pay the price for progress? The now 63-year-old general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers gave the 26-year-old ball player a big helping of food for thought, and then he let him think. Mr. Rickey, Jack Roosevelt Robinson finally answered, I've got 2 cheeks. Jackie walked out of that office with a signed contract, and the experiment was on.
Branch tells Jack, and they called him Jack. I mean, a lot of Branch's friends called him Branch. I mean, the sports writers who got frustrated with the way he bloviated, picked on him a lot, and so and the worst being Jimmy Powers in the Daily News calling him El Cheapo. But there was a definite family connection there, and Jack, he tells Jack that only tell your wife, and I'll let you know when we're going to make this public. Now, Ricky's dream was to have it around New Year's, when there isn't much baseball news. But this is post-war New York, and all a million black soldiers were going to fight fascism, supposedly, and they're coming back to the same old shit. And so there's a lot of publicity in New York and Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Courier. Let's integrate, let's do the right thing. And Rickey, because he's this arch Republican, nobody thinks that he would ever tolerate what it's become today. But he was a Republican, and he doesn't want to be thought that he is cowing to the agitators, let alone communists. So when the word comes that Mayor LaGuardia, the liberal mayor of New York, although he's technically a Republican, is going to make an announcement, we're going to integrate, the teams are going to integrate, Rickey decides to scoop it. Doesn't want it to be an election issue. So Branch's son, Branch Rickey Jr. goes up to Montreal and introduces Robinson. And the sports writers up there thought that this was going to be an announcement that Babe Ruth was going to manage the Montreal Royals. No, but it's Robinson. And so that's when it's announced. And So spring training is in Sanford, Florida, Redmond in 46. And this is well told in 42. And also, you know, the earlier film, the Jackie Robinson story, you know, that where he played himself. And there's real redneck threats coming. And so they move it to Daytona Beach, where they play exhibition games. And Robinson is playing second, which would be his best position, and he winds up having a fantastic year in Montreal without still finding a lot of trouble and racial taunts in places like Louisville and especially, sad to say, Baltimore. And the nature of Robinson, you know, is that his nature is to fight back. And Rickey knew everything about his record back in Pasadena when one of the reports on him was that he had an excessive concern for his constitutional rights. And he had been, after that, he was in the Army and was court-martialed for not going to the back of a military bus, talking to, ironically, a black woman, also an officer, and he got an honorable discharge, but it was the lowest honorable discharge you can get. And there's been a lot of research done about this now, and it was a discharge without any pension benefits. But Rickey knew all this, and that's where that meeting was so, it's one of the most dramatic meetings you could have. And as we were talking before, Marjorie, I mean, nowadays it's hard to imagine somebody having that amount of self-control. But it turned out well, in that the Dodgers won the pennant. The first Dodger pennant really since 41, and they won it without Leo DeRocher as manager because he had been suspended for being Leo DeRocher. And I have always argued, and what I've written since the book, that this was the high point of Rickey's career. Because from then on, the Dodgers never won another pennant for him. Well, they won in 49, but they lost to the Yankees again. And that, it was a fraud. But to give you an idea of how, how he loved the debate, George Weiss, the Yankee general manager, started saying, well, the Dodgers are only good because they have the black players. And so Rickey, well, the Yankees are only good because they have white players. And but he's out after the 1950 season, and and he gets a good deal in Pittsburgh from Galbraith, and O'Malley has taken over the team, and there's still people, and this is why I love to talk about this. There's still intelligent people, although I'm qualified intelligent, who think Rickey moved the Dodgers to L.A. It was O'Malley. And I think part of it was there are always complicated reasons for why things happen. I mean, part of it, though, is that O'Malley wanted to show that, I'm a big guy, I can open up L.A., Rickey may have brought in the farm system and he may have brought in integration, but, I'm a big guy, too. So anyway, the thing with Rickey that continues to fascinate me is that even though he wasn't successful in Pittsburgh, he did sign and pluck Clemente from in fact it was Silkforth who's been called, by the way, baseball's Forrest Gump, because he had such a long career. And he also brought in Roy Face, and of course Skinner and Burden. It's quite an accomplishment. And then he tried the Continental League, which would have, in retrospect, if that Continental League had worked, I mean, you might have 4 18 team leagues now, and a round-robin World Series. And a lot of teams could have been built up from the bottom, but he was too old, and the owners wanted no part of it. And so he went back to St. Louis to aid the Cardinals, but that didn't end so well. But the thing is that when he started the Continental League, and this may be the last word before questions, is they asked him, what's been the greatest thrill in baseball? And he said it hadn't happened yet. And that's why, if you're still a baseball fan, despite all the stuff that's going on nowadays, and will get worse, it is a game of redemption that will reward the inspiration and smartness. And so I open it up for comments and arguments, and thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Lee was good enough to read through several times the different versions of this, and also to write a blurb for the back, so I'm very appreciative.
I mean, to meet, you know, the thing about interviewing, I think it's true, anyone wants to do biography where people know somebody who is still alive, who know the person you're writing about. I had so many interesting interviews. Julia Peoples was Branch's, she was married to Jamie Peoples. Julia was a school teacher. She was Frank Rickey's.
She's the reason Memorial Day was my favorite holiday as a kid, because we go see the graves in Portsmouth, and then we'd go to her farm, and she had a horse and a big tree swing, and we just see them once a year, but they'd have a big spread, and yeah, so she's fun.
Well, her husband, Jamie, said that about Branch, that he couldn't fail because he was Emily Brown's son and Jane Moulton's husband. And the thing, I never met Jane. It's funny, and you might know something. I think she was born Jenny, Jenne, but became Jane. And I love the name Jenny. I mean, but yeah, Mark.
So let me start the first question, and maybe others will throw out questions. I think it's fair to say that the original take on Branch Rickey was he was a man of social justice. And then the revisionist take is no way he was just a smart businessman who realized that signing a black player would bring black Brooklyn fans in. So could you comment on that?
Well, I think that when I said, he was certainly a mixture. And he knew the black players would make a better team, but he was also very, very conscious that the white fans might stay away, and he didn't really have enough time. He got forced out in 4 years, and the Dodger. This is very, I'm glad you raised it, Mark. The Dodgers in 1946, without Robinson, set a record of 1,700,000. Robinson comes up in 47. They break that record, but by less than 100,000. And they never came close to that. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, was what O'Malley used when they saw the attendance going down, and more crucially, the neighborhood was getting too dangerous or too black. Now, the Polo Grounds neighborhood was much more dangerous, but I mean, a lot of the games were still in daytime, so it wasn't that dangerous for the average fan. But the color factor was extremely important there, and the Yankees were very blunt about this. I mean, George Weiss said as late as 1952, the Yankee fan does not want to be exposed to that element.
And here's my kind of more sentimental response. my husband and I were at Cooperstown in 1997 for the 50th anniversary of the signing, and Rachel Robinson was there. And I went up to her and just explained my connection to Branch Rickey, and she looked at me with these kind of glowing eyes, and she said, "Oh, Mr. Rickey, that wonderful man." And I thought, she loved him, then that kind of, displayed some of those controversies for me.
I mean, really, you go, who did Robinson invite to Cooperstown? He didn't expect to get into Cooperstown in the first ballot. Robinson invites his mother, Rachel, and Branch Rickey. But the people who want to make there's so much nitpicking in this story. And I'm all for new information. If I make a mistake on a year, I freely admit it. But don't underestimate the courage that they had. And I mean, Robinson's off the charts in terms of what he had to work with. And I mean, he's really one of the tragic stories. I mean, because you could see how he was seething, and yet, watch the original Jackie Robinson story where he plays himself, I mean, he was quite an actor, and I mean, unfortunately, Arthur Mann, who was very too melodramatic, did too much of the script. But one thing that Branch Rickey set the tone of his foot down is that Arthur Mann wanted to play him in the movie, and thank God, put his foot down.
So let's get other questions. Who else?
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you for doing the Ohio Wesleyan story and how Branch Rickey's punished for playing in but what's interesting, what's unfair, at that same time, Chautauqua has a top-notch baseball team. It's called the Team of Captains. It's got guys from Yale and Princeton and Michigan and everybody. And Amos Alonzo Stagg was their pitcher. And he could throw so hard that hardly anyone could catch him. And so they were having a championship game. They needed Stagg to pitch. And so they went to someplace in Pennsylvania and they paid a catcher to come in and be the catcher. So they had a paid player to help them win the championship, but they were all Yale guys and things, and they weren't punished.
Greg?
So, Lee, I want to lay a little bit of alumni claim to I'm an Allegheny College alum. And Allegheny College down in Meadville, Pennsylvania, 1 hour away, had as its head football coach, Branch Rickey for 1904, 1905, and is in the Allegheny College Hall of Fame. So I want to insert that as a little biographical footnote. He was that close.
I did do
I
spent a day down there, and there's a student paper where he is really upset. I mean, it was part of the reason it was only 1 year is that in the league he was in, the other teams, other schools were using ringers, and so they were not really eligible. But it was, and he could get very indignant about that. So,
I mean, let me just postscript all that. His 2-year record was 8-13. In 1904, it was 5-5, including losses to Penn State and Syracuse. Imagine Allegheny College playing Penn State and Syracuse. In 1905, they were 3-8. So.
Can we get the book online?
yeah, definitely. It's the University of Nebraska Press. They just printed some more. The price is going up to $40, which is for a paperback is kind of. But it's a big book about a big man. That's the one sound bite I've had about it. I'm just sorry he didn't live to see all the sport management programs. I mean, I think that he would probably be working 48 hours a day.
So I'm intrigued by Branch Rickey and O'Malley. Do you have any insight into that dynamic of how those two?
I'm sorry, Branch Rickey.
Walter O'Malley. Yeah. Do you have any insight into what evolved between those two giants and two people that probably don't back down often in their careers?
Yeah, well, it was one of the first things that I wrote on Rickey was in that LIU conference in 1997 about the two titans and the mystery man. And John L. Smith, that's one. I love to find people who've been ignored by conventional history. John L. Smith, born Schmitz in Germany, was the one that the Dodgers had been for 20 years after the original Ebbets died. They were just, their business connected. It was, as a business, it was just a mess. And when Rickey came and they started to build a farm system, they arranged for, O'Malley had predated Rickey. O'Malley had been the lawyer for the bank, McLaughlin. And O'Malley went to Fordham and then Penn, and his father went bankrupt, but Walter got into bankruptcy law, and that's where he wasn't very rich yet, but he saw what was happening. And so, that was destined for problems, but while John L. Smith was alive, he kept them, they were three owners with each a third. Now, Smith was Pfizer Chemical, and he was a rarity. He was a chemist, he was a practicing chemist, but he was also a good businessman. And he made a comment that that you hear so rarely from owners, which is, I don't want to make money, I just don't want to lose money. And Rickey was extravagant in terms of the farm system. He got a cut of every transaction he made. He did in St. Louis and Brooklyn. He quickly said that when the team was doing well, and he would fly if a pitcher was homesick. One of O'Malley's writer friends said, he would fly to Texas to comfort him, and so there were all kinds of expenses. And what was the beginning and the end was he pushed for a Brooklyn Dodger football team, and they actually had one. Now, I don't know how many football sages, by the way. A friend of mine, I don't like nerd, it comes from Dr. Seuss if I had it in the zoo. So a friend of mine suggested sages, and I like that, that's better than scholars because we're not just scholars, So anyway, if you're football sages, Bob Chappius, Chappius, was a Michigan quarterback and a big prospect. And Rickey signed him for a lot of money. He even tried to get Charlie Connolly, who wound up a big giant, New York Giant. And so you had this irony with Rickey, or the contradiction. He was keeping the reserve system in place in baseball, only paying top dollar to the stars. And Robinson, I think after his rookie year, had $35,000, which for that time, for a first-year man, was not so bad. And back then, too, one of Marvin Miller's achievements is that the players back then didn't know what each other was making. Once they found out, the Colfax-Drysdale thing, when they held out together, because they were always being played, well, we can't pay you this year because we're paying Don. We can't pay you this year because we're paying Sandy, But, when that became public, then that ended that. So Rickey was very extravagant, and he played Smith against Rickey. But when Smith died during the All-Star game, he had cancer, and he might have been in remission, and he died during the All-Star game. And once that happened, Rickey knew his contract was up in 1950 at the end of the season, and that's when all the stuff happened. And so, and you respect O'Malley in how he did build that stadium out there. In fact, the good book by Larry McHugh about O'Malley, building a stadium in some ways was his white whale. He wanted it so badly in New York because he knew he was going to take a lot of heat for uprooting that legendary franchise. But Robert Moses wasn't going to give him the land, and I can't totally, I mean, Moses is another guy I might want to have lunch with, but let him pick up the check. When you talk about ironies in life, I mean, Moses never drove. He killed neighborhoods, but he never drove. And there's a statue of him who lived in Babylon.
Let me jump in and say one more question.
Yeah.
And then Marjorie and Lee will stick around and you can talk to them and buy books. So Art Sauls gets the last question.
I'm old enough to have seen Jackie play in 1947. Say a word about the excitement in the borough
Oh,
in that period.
well, you probably have heard the song. There were hit songs from the period. Did you see Jackie Robinson hit that ball? I mean, and he just was, he was a great athlete. Baseball, he was learning baseball. I mean, he only played, he only had about 200 bats for the Kansas City Monarchs, and baseball was his worst sport. But he saw, yeah, and the thing about him though, I never met him, but I saw him once. We were at the Apollo Theater, Aretha Franklin was performing, and he seemed to be looking for a ticket. I mean, I didn't even try to get a ticket. And then there's one, I wrote a story, it was in the All-Star Game program, Jackie Robinson and the Knot-Hole Gang. Now, if you grew up in Brooklyn, and I have this theory that I think is true, Happy Felton went to Allegheny too. And O'Malley told Happy Felton was going to talk to the stars after the game and the Knot-Hole Gang before the game. The Knot-Hole Gang was the Little League kids came and worked out with a Dodger player, and if he won the little fielding exhibition, he got to speak to his favorite player. And so I found the winner 40 years later. I found the winner from that and it was Jackie Robinson's last year at Louis Marino, and Louis was a Giant fan, and when they gave him a Dodger cap, he kind of, he had to hold his breath. And he won because he actually wound up playing for St. Francis College before, and the way Jackie handled these kids, I mean, he was a born teacher, and the old George Burns line, the secret to success is sincerity. If you learn how to fake it, you've got it made. And Jackie, it was really sincere. And the second kid had to grow up on the 8th floor like I did. He asked the most like Lou Mary, he says, who gives the signal on a pitch out, Jack? And the catcher. Then this kid says, well, the bases are loaded, and there's a pop-up in the right field, and the wind blows, and the ball drops, and the runners are running all around. Who's out and who's safe? And the way he answers this question, like he doesn't demean him, he says, well, that's a mouthful there, let's see, And here's another story. I used to do jazz finders for the 92nd Street Y, take people to clubs. And one night at the Tavern on the Green, we lucked out, it was the Illinois Jack Heck big band, and John Lewis from the Modern Jazz Quartet was sung. And there's a woman who finds out, a customer, and we start talking about Brooklyn, and she says she remembers after a game, the boys are all asking for autographs, and the players are ignoring the little girls. And Jackie comes up and says to the boys, says to the other players, let her, you signed for her too. I mean, he really had that sense, and what made it, tragic, but needs to be talked about is that he had such high hopes for people, and he saw a lot of the reality of what a lot of people are like, which is nothing to be so happy about. And he aged so terribly. I mean, you watch him at the Hall of Fame. I mean, he's ready. I mean, and you know, it's almost like he can't believe he's up there, and he's expecting trouble, you know.
So let's say special thanks to Marjorie for joining us.